Hey, what's up, guys? This is John Nelson, and you are listening to the Starting Block Podcast. This is a show for complete athletic development. Our objective here is to give you the tools to win, whether you're the athlete, the parent, or the coach. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Scarborough. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon to you.
So, if you are new to the show, I want to take a second and welcome you. We appreciate it. As I've said the last few episodes, our numbers continue to grow, and that is a testament to all of you guys for sharing the show and getting the word out there. So I appreciate that. And so if you're new, here's our housekeeping and how our show operates, because we are fairly unique compared to most shows that are out there. We have multiple episodes within the show. The first type of episode you're going to hear from us is our standard Q&A. That's a bi-weekly episode where Chris and I will take the questions that you submit to us at
Info at startingblockpodcast.com.
We will take those questions, we'll break through, we'll sort out the good ones and the stupid ones, and we'll answer the good ones. Yeah. How's that for
Maybe we ought to
honesty?
answer a couple of stupid ones, John.
So that's Q&A. The other bi-weekly episode you'll hear from us is our guest interview. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. We have a guest lineup that will rival the best podcasts in the entire world. We're very grateful for that. We appreciate everybody that's joined us. And I want you to understand that, the guest episodes are there for information, but they're also there to network you. We've talked about it, again, beforehand, that I think a lot of shows out there are very coach to coach or doctor to doctor, and it's like our objective here is to give you the tools to win. So these are people that share the same, or relatively the same core values and mission as we do, and it's great to hear how they win and what they do with their clients, patients, and we feel it's somebody that would be awesome for you to connect with. If you're away from somewhere where Chris and I operate. So it's our guest episode. Then the final episode you'll hear from us is going to be the Friday Fire Fact, and I don't do that one every week. We will start ramping that up again here very shortly, but it's basically 10 to 20 minutes of me giving you some guided wisdom or something a little off topic, but still related to performance and the athletic industry, maybe a little bit more mindset, motivation, something like that. But that is our show structure. And then we do ask you that you pay your dues, guys. We do this because we want to give you all the tools to win, and all we ask in return is that you just share the show. If you got value out of it, if you learned something, if it made you laugh, if we answered your question, share the show and bring us a friend. Please help us help support this mission, because that's what this is. This is a mission to give you guys everything you need to win. So that's how our show operates. I also want to mention that we have not released the episode yet, but it will be coming out soon. But we had an awesome interview and episode with Dr. Jen Perez out at Gait Happens, and she offered our listeners a great deal. So I just want to pass that down to you. They have a lot of really good promos and products that are available on their site. And if you use the code Starting Block, you'll get 10% off, and you can get 10% off of either their foot health kit, that includes a bunch of foot health tools like bands, spacers, things like that. You could get 10% off of their Fix the Feet program, which is a 12-week DIY program that's based really on your foot's needs. Or you could get 10% off the Gait Foundation course, and that's a course for health professionals, trainers, therapists, clinicians. It's going to go over anatomy, key assessments, and really give you a deep insight into what they do and how to take those next steps forward. So anyways, I want to thank Dr. Jen for passing that along and being an awesome episode, and that'll come out soon. Like I said, the code is Starting Block, and you would go to their website, and Chris, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared, but I think the website is gaithappens.com. Is that right?
Yes, correct. G-A-I-T. G-A-I-T. Gait,
Yeah.
like walking gait, happens.com.
Yeah.
Gaithappens.com.
Yeah, and in the
By
event
way,
I got that wrong or something, you can go to there. Dr. Jen's super active on social media too, so you can easily access them as well, and I'm sure they can direct you. So that is the show breakdown. And what's that, Chris?
I was going to say, but also her colleague, Dr. Courtney, she and Dr. Courtney, like you said, very active on social media. So give them a follow on Instagram for sure. I mean, that's how I
Yeah.
found, and yeah, they put out some great content on online, free. I mean, a lot of free
Yeah.
content.
Yeah, a lot of free stuff. So yeah, sorry, Dr. Courtney, you and I haven't talked yet, and I didn't mean to cut you out there. So my fault. Much love to you, Dr. Courtney. Thanks for everything. Don't hold that against me. All right. So with all that, that's our housekeeping stuff. Let's go ahead and get going today. Today is Q&A. So what do we got today, Chris?
All right. So question number 1: how does your training differ from in season to off season, or off season to in season? What's the difference?
That's a good question. I think there's two ways to look at it. It depends on if you train kind of the way that we do, Chris, with the utilization of things like ISOs and drops and things like that is kind of one of the primary modalities, or with me, a lot of go-to stuff. Or you could look at it from the traditional standpoint, like if you're kind of more of a weight type of person, like I say West Side, but you know what I mean, like weights and things like that. I don't know. Why don't you go ahead and start, Chris? I know you got some good stuff to probably say on this, and I think I have some good stuff.
Well, my take is I don't like to change intensity. So, for example, I'm going to use speed because speed is my thing. So, I want them to run when we're doing a speed session. Let's just say it's a football team and they have a game on Friday night. Well, we're probably going to do a speed session where they run hard. Okay, they're going to run as fast as they can run. Okay, we're gonna time these things. Probably on Tuesday, maybe Wednesday at the latest. When they run, they're going to run hard. Okay, or let's say they're lifting, they're going to lift hard. They're going to lift fast, or they're going to lift heavy, or they're going whatever it is, that you're doing. I don't want to change the intensity a lot in season. That said, I tend to want to change the frequency, maybe change the volume a little bit, and just so you know what I mean. Intensity would be like,
Yeah, clarify that for some of the listeners. We may have some parents or coaches listening to that.
yeah. So let's take speed for example. Let's just to make the math easy. Okay. Let's say that someone's best speed, their top speed, is going to be 10 yards a second. All right, that's their fastest they can possibly run. When they can no longer run like say 10.3 at that same 10 yards, then that's where okay, we stop. So in other words, they're never learning to run slow. That's what I mean by intense. They're running a certain percentage of their absolute best. Or if you're lifting, they'd be lifting at least a certain percentage of their absolute best. Once they can no longer say get 3 repetitions with their 3 rep max on a given exercise, you would no longer you would terminate that exercise, or 5 rep max, whatever it is you're doing. If you're doing 5 rep maxes, okay, that's great. Once they got to where they couldn't do 5 anymore, you don't do that exercise anymore. Okay, you terminate that exercise. I would, on the other hand, probably adjust the frequency. So in other words, instead of training 3 days a week or 4 days a week, even in the off season, we may drop those hard workouts back to maybe 1 or 2 per week, depending on the sport, depending on the athlete, depending on how well prepared they were before the season started. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Depends on how well
Yep.
prepared they were before the season started. I might adjust the volume a little bit. So, meaning, so instead of say 3 exercises, we're taking to that. We're really working in that intensity bracket. We may only do 2, for example. So, does that sort of answer the question, John?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you touched on the auto regulation side, and I kind of wanted you to touch on that because we did talk about the questions
Yep.
beforehand, and I know the next question coming up, and I want that one.
Okay.
But with this question,
All right.
I got a
Well,
lot to say on the next question. But this way, yeah, the auto
Absolutely.
regulation is just it's a way to address neural fatigue. So, without, we spend a whole episode talking about it, but basically you have to ultimately ask yourself the question, how do you know whether, keeping it simple, for example, how do you know that 3 sets of 10 is enough to create, somebody needs 3 sets of 10 versus somebody needs 4 sets of 10, right? How do you know that? There's really no other way to monitor that. How do you know one is going to stimulate growth, one is going to shut the person down? You utilize autoregulation to help with that. Autoregulation is a great tool if you've never used it. It is very complex. It can be very complex. It's especially if you don't, if you don't have control of everything, but it's a great tool to know what it is, how much an athlete can take.
Right.
As far as like the weights and things like that go, yeah, you auto-regulate it if you get in there, but let's just keep it kind of conventional and traditional here for a second. Let's just say, hey, we're kind of the old model of, main lift and then some assistance work. And I'll speak on that side, but I'm right there with you. So, I'm not really going to drop the intensity. I believe that high intensity is needed. I think there's a lot of benefit to recovery from, with high intensity as well. But dropping the volume is dropping the volume and frequency. So how many times we're training, of course, dropping the volume of it as well. So we're not going to do as many assistance lifts, for example. Now if you really are getting technical into something like the max effort method and all that stuff, and how many sets you're doing over 90, I'm not going to get involved in all that. I'm just saying that maybe instead of doing 4 to 5 assistance exercises, we're dropping it down to like maybe 2 or 3, and maybe dropping down a set or something. That's kind of how I would manage that. But another thing with that, though, I know I have a question I want to ask you, Chris, but before I ask that, is another concept is actually utilizing something like the newbie for in-season training. And then that throws a wrench in everything, because the way that we utilize the newbie when it comes to in-season training is it's all about frequency manipulation as far as current goes and what the individual has had experience with before. See, because you can still get a massive training effect without loading the joints, and that's a whole different ball game. You know what I mean,
Yep.
Chris?
Yes. Yep. Because let's face it, muscles are made to be beat up, recover quickly, and then come right back. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone says, "Well, I have this muscle," yes, you can strain a muscle. Yes, you can. But I'm not talking about a muscle strain. I'm not talking about let's say or a muscle pull. Okay, we're referring to the way muscles are used. They are made to be beat up and come back and do it again and again and again. They're the workhorses of the body. Okay, granted, they only do what the brain tells them to do, but they are the workhorses of the body, and they're made to take a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Unless,
Right.
of course, you don't train them to be able to withstand that work, then you can actually start breaking down. That's a topic for a different day. But
it is, but
yeah.
going back to how much we should be doing this and when, it kind of leads into the next question. I want your opinion on this. Of like,
Yep.
We talk about dropping the frequency of training, so how many days a week we're training, but there are people that I remember reading, like Derek Jeter, for example. He likes to go through a light warm up, or he likes to train basically the day before, the day of a game. But it'd be like a light workout, kind of get the body going or something. But nowadays, I guess with the the weakened state of our freaking country and everybody's weak mentality, you've got kids saying, "Hey, I don't want to train 3 days before they have to pitch." It's like, what the hell happened here? So it kind of goes into your question. How do you like to do that with athletes? So like you said, you had a football person, for example, they got a game Friday night. What's going to be kind of your schedule? You got a good hardcore heavy duty lift or whatever training session Tuesday. What are you looking to do on Wednesday, Thursday?
Wednesday, Thursday's probably going to be ISO extremes. Now, keep in mind, I'm referring to a client. Well, let me back up. I'm going to back up. We might do some rebounds or some altitude drops on Wednesday. Okay, some, all right, enough to at least keep the body prepared to do it again the next time. Thursday would be doing ISO extremes. And again, I'm referring to the prepared person, the person who has already gone through this type of work. Okay, we're talking about a brand new person who's never done an altitude drop in their life. I'm not putting that person in altitude drops the Wednesday before a Friday game. Okay, but the person who's worked all summer and has learned to do altitude drops, has done ISO extremes, has done rebounds, has done other types of lifting, has done some rotational work, fill in the blank, that person can do their intense lifting / speed training on Tuesday. They could do things like their altitude drops on Wednesday, and then ISO extremes on Thursday. Because ISO extremes done properly, John, as you and I know, you do them correctly, it will recover everything you did earlier that week.
It will. It will. Yep. It'll recover everything.
So it will recover everything. So kind of save those for that Thursday workout. And you don't have to do a ton of exercises. You can pick 2 or 3, hit your ISO extremes, and you're good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think another thing that I like to do is, I'll train day of a game. All right. I have no problem doing that. It's, again, it's just monitoring what you're doing. And understanding where the athlete or individual is, in their training, cycle or progressions. But I like to do kind of a cool combo for me is, I'm a big sled puller, and if you don't like pulling sleds and you want to argue with me about it, I don't really care. I like it. It's a great tool. We do a shit ton of it at ELP, but we'll go out and we'll pull some, kind of lighter sleds just to get some GPP type work in, kind of get the blood flowing, moving a little bit. We may do a little ISOs, but I like to hit like a little bit of, moderate go to recode work. We just kind of reinforce some back chain dominant, again, get the body moving. And I like to use the impulse, the impulse inertia machine and not go excessively, intense on it, but just work on that timing. I've just felt that has always given me really, really good results. Mm-hmm. Athletes like to come in and just get like a full body impulse workout, gets the blood flowing, gets you loosened up, maybe finish with some ISOs to make sure you're recovered. And that's just something that I like to do in season.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because, I don't remember, John, if it was on our podcast with him or if he said this on a different podcast, but Jay Schroeder referred to when he worked with one of his World Series winning pitchers, he was actually working with that pitcher's teammate initially. And, come in and work and do a training session for like 2 hours right before a game, 2 hours the day of a game. And that same player who Jay was training would go out and perform great that night.
Mm-hmm.
It's like so clearly, just because you're working doesn't necessarily your body's not prepared. I think there's an over reliance in general on too much rest, I guess you would say. Not too much recovery, but too much rest. And as a result, now, to your point that you made earlier, now people come in unprepared because they've done too little. And thus, there's no more pitchers throwing 100 pitches in a game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, that was a good question. I think there's all kinds of different variables that play a role in it. And it also depends on how you monitor recovery. Like I said, doing something like auto-regulation and, inducing a specific fatigue amount or, like I said, utilizing additional tools like utilizing something like NeuroTarget to check, how, neural impulses are working and are they in a good sympathetic, parasympathetic balance. There's all kinds of stuff we can do. But in general, I think you can say kind of typically drop the volume a little bit, but keep the intensity high. And I think there's probably people that do a lot of traditional lifts that would probably disagree with that, but that's how we roll with it. So that was a good question. Appreciate whoever sent that in.
Yes.
All right. What's next, Chris?
All right. Next. All right, John. Olympic lifts. What do you think? Do them? Don't do them?
That's the question.
All right. So Olympic lifts for your athletes. Do you train them? Do you not train them? What are your thoughts from that? Now, keep in mind, we are referring specifically to an athlete who is not an Olympic lifter. Okay, so we're talking baseball player, football player. We're referring to softball player, basketball player. We're referring to we're not referring to the person who is doing Olympic lifting as a sport. Okay.
Correct.
So
correct. That's a very good point to make. Yeah. That Olympic lifting is actually a sport. People remember that. Okay. So What do I think about Olympic lifting? Well, I think I've answered this question on another episode, but I'll dig into it again. Now, I'm not hating on anybody that does Olympic lifting. If you do Olympic lifting, good for you. That's awesome. I personally do not teach it, and I don't teach it in my facility for a handful of reasons. Let's back up for a second. You got to ask yourself, why are we doing Olympic lifting? And in general, the answer is to develop explosiveness. But understand that, there's no such thing as explosive lifts. The reference is to how the lift is performed, okay? The Olympic lifts don't really develop explosiveness, all right? They're actually, when you break them down, they are actually much closer to strength speed, which isn't explosiveness. Explosiveness is developed through jumps, all right? It's developed through depth jumping and bounds and things like that, all right? It's not developed through Olympic lifting. When you break down all the Soviet techs and Eastern Bloc techs, there's one major thing in common. None of the greats mentioned Olympic lifting when it comes to explosiveness. And I got that from Louis Simmons there. I don't remember. It was in one of his books or podcasts or something that he did. But none of the greats mentioned Olympic lifting when talking about developing explosiveness. And the reason it doesn't develop explosiveness is simply because of the bar speeds, right? So I think when they did test of Olympic lifting, and they found that, typically, the average bar speed, I think, was between 0.6 to 0.8 meters per second. All right. Which actually will fall more into the power realm. And that's not where explosiveness is, guys. So when you look at bar speed differentials here, absolute strength is going to be at about 0.15 to, 0.35 meters a second. Strength speed is going to be 0.8 to 1. Speed strength is 1 to 1.5, and starting strength is going to be anything greater than 1.5 meters per second. So, you're not developed, the bar speed is not going to be consistent. And that's even with people that do that for a freaking living. They Olympic lift for a living. So you're telling me that if they can't do that at the proper bar speeds on a consistent basis, that high school kid is going to be able to do that? No, of course not. It's not feasible. It just doesn't make sense. Maybe one out of every 100 lifts, that's an exaggeration. Maybe one out of every 10, they actually hit the right bar speed to develop some quality that's close to speed or something. It just doesn't make any sense at all. And I guess the other area is they're too dangerous and technical. I don't even know how to coach them. Somebody asked me, they're going to a pretty high level soccer program, and they're like, we need to do Olympic lifting. I'm like, well, I'm not going to teach you how because I don't even know how to do it because we don't incorporate it here, But because let's think about it. If I can develop the same qualities in a much more consistent and safer manner with just having somebody jump, then I'm going to get 3 weeks of gains before the other person gets any at all because they're too busy worrying about technique. And I don't know. To me, it just doesn't make sense. I've just never really understood why people are so glued and so committed to Olympic lifting to develop the explosiveness when the research and common sense is there. The other two little elements to it are we got to understand that 99% of sport are speed strength anyways, but there's also a massive lack of the eccentric phase in a lot of these minus the hang clean. So it doesn't make sense. And I think if coaches, you're doing this in high school because that's what they do at the collegiate level, well, then maybe there's something wrong with the system. And are we really doing the athlete, are we providing the athlete the most benefit by just preparing them for college? Why don't we prepare them to perform the best they can while they're in high school right now?
Yep.
That's what I got to say.
Yeah. Well, to your point, John, this is not knocking Olympic lifting as a sport.
No, not at all.
If you are, even if you're just an enthusiast and you just want to get better at the Olympic lifts, go for it. I think it's fantastic.
Go for it. Absolutely. You're more of a man than I am.
Keep in mind, you got to remember who we're talking about, and that is baseball players, softball players, basketball players, soccer players, football players, people who do not need to do Olympic lifting for the sake of Olympic lifting. They are doing Olympic lifting
Mhm.
for, or thinking they're doing Olympic lifting for the
For
sake of
right,
improving
for a
sport
purpose.
performance. Correct.
Right. Not
So,
for the sake of
it,
putting numbers up on a bar.
correct. So that said, I I come from a different angle. Before I was a speed guy, I was an Olympic lifting guy. So I was USA weightlifting certified back in the mid '90s, and okay, long time ago. John was probably still he was still in diapers then. So
Oh,
anyway,
that may not even been around.
I go back to with Olympic lifting a long time. Well, there's a reason I got away from it, and it has nothing to do with the fact that they're bad or they're somehow totally ineffective. I mean, I think they are, but there's so many more better ways. I mean, to almost quote Gary Reinl here, is it the best
Hmm.
way? Well, I learned over time that in my opinion, it was not the best way to train the athletes I trained. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's why I got away from them. I'm not training an Olympic lifter. In my career I've trained one who actually competed in Olympic lifting, and you know that's that's they rarely come along, and it really to me was totally unnecessary. Now, that
Yeah.
said, um, John, if someone feels like they have to, you and I talked to George Benet with Pure Motion, and he
Hmm.
has some adaptive. I'll call it adaptive equipment. So if you feel like you have to do Olympic lifting, he's got adaptive pieces that can take the stress off your wrist, that can make it easier, allow the bar to be more under your center of mass instead of in front of you. Ways to still do if it's looking for the benefit of the Olympic lifting to perform another sport, I would look at Pure Motion and look at some of their stuff because you can get all the benefits without feeling like you're going to injure your athletes.
Yeah, and injury is a huge part of it. I mean, a couple other elements is like I'm going to try and save the joints and connective tissue, and so like if we got a baseball player, I'm not going to sit there and watch them try to watch their wrists absorb this bar in that position. It just doesn't make sense to me. The elbows take a beating. But it's also evaluating it from the standpoint of front chain, back chain dominant. I mean, just look at how somebody lands a clean. What happens? Are we inside ankle bone high? Are we inside ankle bone low? Are we front chain dominant, back chain dominant? What are we actually developing? And as Ricky has always stated, and I give Ricky credit because I'm stealing it from him. There's two engines. There's the movement and the lifting engine. Movement's going to be forward gear, and lifting engine is reverse gear. You can't keep driving the car in reverse. It's not going to make it very far. And that's kind of where Olympic lifting falls. And then you add in the movement pattern, that are created with it as well. And it's an inefficient thing to do. And I mean, the people that still argue about that, like, fine, if you're a great Olympic lifting coach, cool. I mean, good for you. I'm happy for you. I'm not. And if somebody wants to do Olympic lifting, I refer them out. I don't even waste time doing it. I explain why. I probably explain it in a little bit more professional manner, versus just getting on here and talking about it, but explain the pros and cons, and think it's just ultimately there's a safer and more effective way to develop the qualities that you're looking to develop for the max benefit of the athlete. My concern is that the athlete is reaching their fullest potential and is safe and healthy, because the best athlete is the healthy athlete while they're in high school, middle school. I'm not concerned about what the college program is doing. That's not my job. My job is to make sure they're performing as efficiently as possible and that they're healthy. I don't care what they're doing at the next level right now.
Yeah, the best ability.
Now, when they get to the next level, I'll cross that bridge when I get there.
Yes, yes, yep.
What were you saying? You cut out a little bit, and I missed that. What were you getting ready to say?
I just said that the best when you're middle school, high school, the best ability is availability. You better be available. So, you know,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
yeah. Like we discussed, we said this on numerous podcasts. I had 6
Mm-hmm.
athletes last summer that showed up with some form of history of stress fracture, stress something rather in their spine. That was last summer. This summer hasn't been that bad,
Yeah.
but I was like, that's crazy, to have that many show up with that, and most of them done in the weight room. So I don't know. Just,
Yeah.
determine what caused that, if you will. So
Yeah. So whoever asked that, that was a good question.
yes.
I appreciate
By
you
the way,
asking it. You guys have been asking for more Friday Fire, and that's a sure way to get me all fired up to talk about something. Um, but
that's
yeah, I just think there's more efficient ways to develop it.
that question came from our
Say
friend.
that again, Chris.
That question came
Oh,
from
Wade.
Wade. Yes, Wade Houchin over at
Gotcha.
Wizard
Cool.
Performance is the one who sent that question in. So thank you.
Cool. Gotcha. Well, I appreciate that, Wade. Those are good questions, guys. Thanks for sending those in to us. So remember, if you got any other questions, send them to info@startingblockpodcast.com. Two other quick things while I'm thinking about it. One, we are, and I've been saying it for a couple weeks, we had a little bit of a hang up, not because of any disagreements or anything. It's just kind of a time thing for everybody. If you follow me, we opened we're working out of actually one of our partners' places in East Memphis a couple days a week. So I've been busy with that. Dr. J's been busy with a few other things. Dr. J and I actually spoke. I guess you're hearing this Tuesday. I'm recording it on Thursday. We spoke. We're almost done getting everything. So as soon as that's done, we will announce the NeuroTarget certification that is coming up, and we got a couple really cool surprises with that as well. So I do ask you to pay attention to that. And we will put all that information out on an episode, and it'll all be on the website as well. So I want to make sure they got that across. And that's going to wrap it up for us today, guys. That is the show. Again, if you got some value out of this, you learned something. If I pissed you off, then please go share the show. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys. See you.